But I can't avoid the topic, the virus panic. I tell you, we look like utter fools. In fact, we've managed to panic ourselves into almost total paralysis, almost literally paralysis, now that half the population in the country is in lockdown. Brisbane, the Gold Coast, Townsville, Sydney, Darwin, Perth. And that's when these very same cities have had minimal new infections. All right, yes, 19 people in Sydney, but almost all close contacts, just 2 in Brisbane, 2, one of whom the Chief Health Officer actually said wasn't a worry. 2 in Darwin, who are actually just the wife and daughter of an infected man. They were all already in isolation, not infecting anyone. And not one new infection in any other of the lockdown cities. None anywhere else either, Melbourne, Adelaide, whatever. What's more, not one virus death this whole year, and just 2 people now in intensive care. Yet half Australia now in lockdown. Let me just show you one fresh example of how stupid we've been, how quick to panic into exactly these lockdowns. Look at Britain. Now, half the people there are fully vaccinated. Note that, half, no more. And most of them already with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And now Britain is opening up. In fact, the Wimbledon tournament is being held in front of crowds, and the fans there gave a standing ovation to Professor Sarah Gilbert, who led the team that gave the world that AstraZeneca, this passport to freedom.
We would like to thank all those who have contributed so much during this unprecedented period in all our lives. Today, they include leaders who have developed the anti-COVID vaccines,
but in crazy Australia, guess what? AstraZeneca, no standing ovation for that. That's the vaccine that many Australians won't touch. They're too scared. They've heard journalists screaming about blood clots. I mean, there's a 1 in 2 million risk of dying, so panic. And politicians didn't have the guts to stand up to this panic. In fact, they fed it. The Prime Minister, he announced that on health advice, no one under 60 could now be given this dangerous vaccine. And big surprise around the country, we now have doctors with AstraZeneca in their cupboards nearing the expiry date, and no patients want it. 2.5 million doses out there apparently. 2.5 million. Oh no, don't put that in our arms. And this is exactly one reason why we're in lockdown. Not enough people vaccinated. Less than a third of us have had even one jab. Thankfully though, most of the elderly, most of the people in aged care have been vaccinated, which is one reason we're not getting the deaths anymore. Not one death so far this year, let me underline that. But back to the AstraZeneca. Last night, with half the country now about to be locked down, the Prime Minister went, whoops, maybe we did go a bit too negative about this AstraZeneca, and so change of plan. Morrison announced, from now on, anyone, old, young, whatever, you can take the AstraZeneca if your doctor agrees.
If they wish to go and speak to their doctor and have access to the AstraZeneca vaccine, they can do so.
Incredible, right? I mean, last week, AstraZeneca was too deadly for the young. This week, the government hopes they'll actually take it because now, of course, people are more scared of the virus than they are of the vaccine. And these lockdowns are driving us all nuts. And this is not leadership. This is just populism. Politicians following the crowd. And they're all at it, most of our leaders. You check 2 of our worst, our most populist, the most fear-mongering. For them, these lockdowns are still not enough. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, who, by the way, has not one single recent infection in his state. And Queensland's Anastasia Palaszczuk, they now say, shut the borders. Do not let Australians come back home.
If it's a choice for me between less people coming back, and yes, there would be pain with that, or locking the whole place down, that's not a difficult decision.
We need a massive reduction in overseas arrivals because the overseas arrivals are bringing in these contagious strains.
Are these people nuts? So Australians overseas What, they've got to stay there permanently overseas? My daughter as well. And the rest of us can never leave? Hotel California? I mean, make no mistake, these two premiers with their false dichotomy, they're actually looking for a distraction for their own miserable failures to do the simple basics. You take Palaszczuk, Queensland Premier. She's saying, blame returning travellers for these lockdowns. Well, actually, blame her health officials for not doing their job. You take the two Queenslanders who tested positive yesterday. One got infected in an outbreak caused by a failure in Queensland's quarantine hotel. And the other, a casual receptionist who got infected because, and God knows why, she was allowed to work against the rules in the COVID ward of the Prince Charles Hospital when she had not been vaccinated.
Let me say I am absolutely furious about this. Well, the directive said that they actually needed to be in the ward vaccinated. She was located outside the ward, so for some reason she wasn't vaccinated.
Now here's an idea. Rather than lock away Australia like some North Korea, how about we just run quarantine wards and quarantine centres a bit better? And protect the old and sick, and then stop panicking about infections that won't actually make the vast majority of Australians very sick at all. Let me show you the difference between us and the rest of the world in terms of how we regard this problem. In Britain, yes, there are still lots of new infections from this virus, 22,000 yesterday, but just 3 deaths. Now, sure, that may change. It's a lagging indicator, deaths with infections. But, you know, it seems most of the vulnerable have been protected. But that's with just 2/3 of people in Britain fully vaccinated. 2/3. Here we've got the Prime Minister and Premier saying we need more than 80% of people vaccinated before they'll stop locking us up. 80%. Seriously. You look now at the big tourism countries of Europe, it's some are there, and they're letting in tourists who have been fully vaccinated. Vaccine passports. In Greece, for instance, and in France as well. Vaccinated tourists are welcome from countries without big outbreaks. Same story in Italy and in Spain, and also in Croatia, nearly 2 million tourists let in there. And most of these countries I've named have just 1/3 of their people fully vaccinated and still have more infections than us. Now you may say, what fools they are, what risks they are taking, how callous they are about deaths and all that. And they will say, yes, but we're getting on with life, balancing the dangers against the gains, just like Australia has done every year with the flu, which usually kills 1,000, 2,000 of us each season. So maybe we're the fools, a timid people who are followed, not led, by their leaders.